Hey there, campers. Welcome back to another Lorcana video here. I've got my best friend Gibby with me, and we have a pretty fun topic, hyping up some of the cards in Ursula's Return, the next and fourth expansion pack for the Lorcana trading card game. We're really excited about it. There's been tons of videos, tons of hype as the cards have hit Dreamborn. They are in Pixelborn for people to start playing with, and the set drops on Friday. I know I'm going to be running a release event at my local store. Hopefully, Gibby, you've got some opportunities lined up to play as well.
I do.
That's fantastic. What we want to do here is something a little bit different that hopefully not a lot of people are doing, which is we want to talk about our favorite sleeper cards. These are cards that are non-obviously good, or at least we think they're going to be good, but not ones that a ton of people are talking about, or maybe they're not talking about them enough. So we've each picked one card from each of the ink types, and we are going to go ahead and get started and run those out for you right now. So kicking it off, I have my Ruby selection. This is Noi Acrobatic Baby. Despite being one of the goofiest looking artworks we've seen so far, very cute, very funny. I think this card is seriously good in the right circumstances. So we have a 4/4 stat line, 4-cost inkable. Yes, it only quests for one, but that's because you do not want to be questing with this baby. This baby's trying to do some kung fu action.
Literally, this baby.
Yeah, whenever you play an action, this character takes no damage from challenges this turn. This is really cool, not just because obviously you're able to take trades with no repercussions. You can partially trade into something even bigger like a Maui and not even worry about it. But the other thing is because of the ability for Ruby to so easily ready things ready its characters with things like Fan the Flames, LeFou, Shield of Virtue. This becomes a really intriguing card, along with some sort of action packages. Imagine having this out, playing a brawl to remove something of your opponents, and then this can take a free trade. Seems really good. Can't die to Medusa. Gibby, am I right or am I right?
I think Noi is fantastic as being a yeah, she's like a shield breaker is kind of the way I look at it. It's like bodyguard. Like she's fantastic against bodyguard characters.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you can do the whole readying actions and things. There have been previous cards and previous sets that have had this I take no damage in a challenge based off of this condition kind of cards. But the preconditions have been a little bit more challenging to meet, and it hasn't felt like those cards are necessarily worth it. This is a lot more obtainable, a lot more easier to come by. There's a lot more synergy within the deck building strategy versus something like the previous Raya, I think from Floodborn, where you don't take any damage when you challenge a damaged character. That's a lot harder to fulfill. So
and she was more expensive. She was
5 drop.
A little bit. I think she had 3 defense only. So yeah,
5 attack, 3 defense, which doesn't mean a whole lot when you're like challenging something and apparently not going to take damage, but you can be cleared a lot easier. I think the stat line here is perfect for the cost. She's inkable. I think Noi is going to be a great card.
It'll be cool to see where she slots into. 4 drop is a contested slot, but there's no doubt this is a good card if you have enough actions to supplement it.
Yeah, I think in prior sets, Noi may not have fit as well, but with the amount of challenge card synergy that we're seeing come in with this Ursula return set, I think Noi is going to be a lot better positioned.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Gibby, tell me about Tuk Tuk.
Tuk Tuk! Tuk Tuk lively partner. Same. They're like, this is the same part of the movie where they're like running through like the kind of like Singapore-esque like city. But Tuk Tuk lively partner, evasive, 2/3 for 3 costs and a quest for 1. When you play this character, you may move him and one of your other characters to the same location for free. That other character gets +2 attack this turn. So Tuk Tuk has a lot of different applications here. There are already locations established from the last set that are pretty good. But maybe one of the biggest downsides to some of those really powerful locations was the cost that it took to get characters to locations, and it usually meant running suboptimal actions and things like that. with the exception of a card like Jim Hawkins, which automatically moved himself to a location and allowed you to play at that location for free. Those kind of combo cards, doing multiple things with locations and kind of removing some of those cost barriers, seem to be pretty effective. Tuk Tuk does that at an earlier drop. There's a lot of very good early locations, or locations that have powerful effects, and we're seeing a lot of locations come out within the Ursula Return set that don't necessarily gain you that passive lore, which I think you and I agree is one of the best parts about locations. But if you're not going to get passive lore from it, and there are locations that are going to give you lore working towards a win condition, but require someone to be there, Tuk Tuk is fantastic for enabling those and working around those entry costs. You can play a 1-drop, you can play a powerful location on 2, and then you can drop Tuk Tuk on 3, move that 1-drop there, and Tuk Tuk to that location. The 1-drop that you moved along with Tuk Tuk is going to get +2 attack, hopefully trade up into something, and now you've got some steam, you've got some momentum, and you're starting to take advantage of the board.
Yeah, it does seem to be sort of perfectly aligned with the steel ruby combination, and especially both of these 2-cost challenge focused locations, Thieves and the Snuggly Duckling, and the ability to buff up whatever 1-drop you played, preferably like a 1/3, is, I mean, it seems, or even like a Captain Hook if you need to hit a really big number for whatever reason. It seems quite promising. The other thing about this is that it seems like it's a great card to play after turn 3. In fact, it's probably better after turn 3 in most scenarios. So it's a card that you'll look at later in the game, and you won't be like too bummed to pick it up off the top of your deck.
Yeah, this is a card that I actually think, I'm verifying the cost on it. Yeah, this is actually a card that I could see making Maui's Place of Exile actually work relatively well too.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
For the resist, because it is a two cost location. I'd say it's a card that I've been very interested in.
Yeah,
Maui's Place of Exile, but it doesn't necessarily. It feels like it's too slow unless you have a way to cheat things into it. But with the resist and being able to live some different trades, I do think this could be very interesting.
I also think it's kind of wild that this also gets evasive. So after you do all that movement, you still are a stickier body. Yeah. It's hard for your opponent to engage with. I think it's great.
Yeah, I didn't even talk about the evasive piece of it, but you're right, that's important. So I think overall, between the body, the ink cost is, or the lore count is negligible for what it quests for. But the being inkable, a 3-drop, a solid body, and an on play effect that is very useful makes this card underwhelming, or just a sleeper card that I
think people look at it and go, oh, that's cute, and I think they're definitely not like as hype on this as maybe they should be, especially because the more locations are in the game, the more this card scales into the future.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, this is a super dark horse card for me. I'll be honest.
I need you to explain this.
I went off the deep end on this one a little bit, but here's the thing. I looked at all of the Emerald cards. I think Emerald is getting the highest quantity of good cards this set of all of the other ink. Ruby is a close second, in my opinion. And I think Emerald is in a absurd position to just take off in a bunch of different archetypes, both at different speeds, right? Aggro, mid-range, and even control, which is very exciting because mostly it's been an aggro tempo focused color for the entirety of Lorcana's existence. And so here's the thing. We've seen a ton of these give reckless effects throughout the first 3 sets. So we had John Silver in the first set, and Iago. John Silver did see some play. He doesn't see as much anymore. Why? Because the speed of the game for Emerald decks is faster. Emerald decks are trying to go underneath their opponents, whether it be these, Emerald Steel Discard decks or Emerald Amethyst, sort of tempo controlling aggro decks, right? There's not a lot of decks that want to be inking up to 6, right? But that doesn't mean John Silver's not a great card. I personally had a lot of success with him in the first 2 chapters, right? We also saw Lyle see some fringe play. Lyle Tiberius Rourke saw some fringe play as a way to slow the game down against other aggro decks or other aggressive strategies. The problem with Lyle is actually nothing to do with his effects. Being able to give reckless and whenever one of your characters dies, your opponent loses 1 lore. the problem with Lyle is, what strategy was he fitting in? A strategy that wants to slow the game down, that wants to be the controlling player, right? Wants to stop them from questing and sap their lore. We are now seeing effects or seeing cards that are designed to slow the game down for Emerald. Things like this, this new board wiping Prince Phillip and other things like that. If Lyle was good enough as an uninkable that only quests for 1 to potentially see play, there is a world in which Jacques, as an inkable with a 1/4 stat that quests for 2 to serve as a hybridized replacement for him when you have too many uninkables, but you still want to slow the game down. I think it really comes down to the fact they quest for 2. I think this is, again, extremely dark horse pick. This is like the one of all of these that I probably won't pan out. But I think that if this card had been in the game, this is how I evaluate cards sometimes. Like, if this card had been in the game in the first chapter, it would have seen a lot of play, I think, because of the 2 questing body. And that really makes a huge jump into this later set. But if they ever introduce more mechanics of things that capitalize off your opponent being reckless, or more things where your cards get challenged, or whenever your cards die, I think this could really make a difference. Also, it's cute as heck, and when you line it up next to Gus, it makes a single artwork.
Yes,
so I had to throw it in there.
Yeah, fair. I don't have a whole lot of commentary on this because I don't know about this card enough. Like, I can't rationalize.
You can also say that you don't agree and you don't believe me.
Well, I think reckless is a great, like, giving somebody reckless is a very, like, that's a potent effect on a card.
It can be, yeah.
But I do like that this card is inkable versus Lyle. And it does quest for 2, which is important. And Emerald is always looking for more early questers that are solid and not having to splash into another faction in order to get it. It creates a little bit more flexibility for aggro decks within Emerald. But I think what it's going to come down to is, what is the 1-drop, 2-drop, or do you end up targeting to play Jacques later?
I think this is a card that wants to not be in an aggro deck. It wants to stymie aggro decks by not letting them quest.
Like, do you aim to play Jacques on 5, having played Prince Phillip in red on 4, and then you force a trade into a Prince Phillip and, like, ruin their life?
Possibly. And I think that you're looking at a card just like Lyle that wants to say, oh, you're playing Cursed Merfolk. Now your Merfolk's reckless. Come challenge me and die and get nothing out of it.
And get nothing out of it.
Right. Or target their Flynn, or target their Lilo, or whatever the aggressive,
it's like an anti-aggro card.
Yeah. And then it is anti-aggro. And then in a slower, game, you get to ink it. And this is sort of redundancy for Lyle, which I think would be your first choice if you could afford the uninkables. So anyways, that's why I think Jacques is not necessarily bulk, but he probably will be bulk. But
it's like a back-end inclusion on a deck once you already have a formulated, like, idea. And if you and you've play tested the deck and you realize that you're weak to aggro and you need an inclusion to slow the game down, this is that card.
Yeah, it allows you to run 6 Lyles effectively. So anyways, that's it. Next. Hey,
bumbling rooster. I've seen some people talking about this card and kind of being able to rationalize this effect. When you play this character, if any opponent has more cards in their inkwell than you, you may put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. It's a 3-cost inkable for 2/3, so literally the same cost and stat line as Tuk Tuk. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Except it does quest for 2, which is also great. We just talked about how early questers are needed in Emerald, and this is a great early quester. One of the biggest conversations, I think, especially with the new formatting and all of that, in competitive play, is the idea about going first, being on the play, as they call it, or being on the draw, going second. Right. And the disadvantage that it is going second. This is a card that helps the disadvantage, and you catch up being on the draw. Because naturally, on turn 4, you can play hey, not having inked yet. You are behind on ink, assuming that your opponent, which most of the time they will, has inked on their first 4 turns to get to 4 ink. You're at 3. You drop hey. You're able to take the top card of your deck, put it in your inkwell face down and exerted. You can still ink that turn if you want to, and you can go up to 5 on that turn, but you can still play like a 4-drop on that turn 4. But now for the rest of the game, you're now ahead. You've now caught up in the ink game. It's a little bit of ramp. We haven't seen anything like this in Emerald, and it gives a little bit of that catch-up mechanic to allow Emerald to be a better going from second faction. And it also helps even aggro decks, like as the Emerald, as an Emerald Steel player. Hey allows me on turn 4 to drop Hey, still ink, get to 5, and not have to worry about it for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
Now my hand is my hand.
I do think it's also nice in that, like, you can, this gives you an angle to punish ramp. So if on turn 2 they go 1 jump, and turn 3 they quill, then on turn 3 you can just ink and play this on curve as a 2-quester that lets you keep up on ink with them, and close the gap a little bit as far as resources go. So it's nice as a counter to ramp, which is always going to be strong in this game, and it's also nice in the way you demonstrated it, which is that sometimes as long as you are willing to undercurve it. And again, playing a 3-drop on turn 4 is not always a bad thing. You're going to have your deck, especially if you're an aggressive strategy, your deck is going to be packed full of 1-drops. I mean, if you play this in a Merfolk, you're pretty happy with that turn on turn 4, especially because next turn you can play a 6-drop. So, and we just talked about how most Emerald aggressive decks have been forced to abandon playing anything over the cost of 5 because of the fact that they can't ink up to 6 reliably. If they're playing an aggressive strategy, maybe that changes with Hey. I think it's a really cool card, and one that I've seen the community divided on, but I think that you and I are landing on the side of on the correct side of the debate. So I wanted to throw Triton Young Prince in there as another pretty sleeper, pretty dark horse candidate. I think most people have just immediately moved on from this card. Why? Because Sapphire is so good with items, and this does nothing for items, right? I think that there is a little bit of a community struggle to envision new archetypes. I think Lorcana is a young enough game where the top level competitive players they don't really focus on the on forging new ground as much as maybe they should. And I also think that the more Johnny style players sometimes get a little bit too far the other direction and create these amusing combinations of cards that will never realistically get off the ground. I think Triton is an interesting card in that it's somewhere in the middle where it's asking you to imagine a Sapphire deck that doesn't care as much about items and instead cares about locations, which is somewhat hard to imagine. But when you think of it in that frame of mind, it's actually a fantastic, almost perfect card for that. And the reason being is not only do you have the ability, which feels unnecessary, to be able to challenge evasive characters, right, and control a little bit of the Minnie Mouses that are in the format, you also get this nice upside ability of your locations going away in a deck where maybe you're running out a lot of early game cheap locations, like you're playing out Motunui on 2. Maybe you played on 3. You played one of the locations from Steel or something like that, right? Or Ruby. You played Agrabah, and then this comes down, and as we've sort of established, the idea about locations is that they are really great at sort of putting pressure on the lore game, but of course, when they're only really good when ahead. Because if you get behind and you're putting locations out, your opponent is just sort of cherry picking them off the board. With Triton in play, that becomes significantly less appealing because they are going to go into your inkwell and help you towards what may be, I say may, be a ace in the hole for a location archetype, which is the Shift Triton, which comes down for 6 and enables your for each location you have out, your opponents have a constant -1 attack, and so it basically renders your opponents incapable of challenging your locations. I think that there's something there. Is there something there now? Maybe not. Is there something there in the future? I can't stop thinking about it. I think so. And in that world, I think Triton is a key piece of it, if for no other reason than being a shift target, but more likely because he helps you towards your own shift target. If your opponents are not dealing with the early game locations you played on 1, 2, and 3, um, then then you are going to be able to be pressuring so much lore. If they are trying to deal with your locations you played on 1, 2, and 3, Triton is turning them into ink so that you can play your big threats later in the game and keep churning new locations that are more expensive out, like McDuck Manor or RLS Legacy, or if you're in, Amethyst, the Queen's Castle, stuff like that. So I think it's a cool card that literally no one is talking about, and it's a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, I also like the fact that it's a prince. For Pride
Sure.
Rock,
Pride Rock.
It enables
Yeah,
another,
good point.
but is a relatively established location. Maybe that pairing between Amber and Sapphire is there too. But
Yeah.
I like the fact that it can challenge Evasives. It's a little bit of a controller card. And it just is going to depend on what locations we see starting to provide value and work off of other cards, because
Right.
Triton isn't working off of the locations necessarily, but just wants to punish your opponent for not dealing with them quick enough. Which,
well, actually, he's punishing them for dealing with them. He's like incentivizing them
quick
not
enough,
to deal
like
with
until
them.
he gets down. But like,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Once Triton's down, and if they don't want to have to worry about getting all the resource from killing the locations, and what are they doing? They're not touching your locations; they're killing Triton, which you're probably happy with.
You're probably okay
your
with
locations are surviving. So like, it's a somewhat distraction card, but it's also it's a choose your own adventure. Like of pain.
Choose your own adventure of pain. I love it.
Of pain.
Very
do you
nice.
want to give me resources, or do you want to give me my resources that I've already got on board? So
yeah, that's true. A little bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk about Prince Phillip. Why do you like this card, Gibby?
Prince Phillip, 3-drop, 1/3, quests for 2. He's got support. I think support is fantastic. In the right places. He's not going to support for a whole lot because he has the 1 attack, right? But Sapphire does already have a whole lot of synergy of other support cards, including one of our favorite cards that we want so desperately to work from the second set, which is Alice. Whenever one of your characters is chosen for support, this does not necessarily mean that Prince Phillip...
support.
Yeah, his support. You can have another support character out, and maybe someone's supporting Phillip. Maybe somebody wants to make this gallant defender a little bit more of a gallianter defender. I don't know. One of your characters is chosen for support. They gain resist +1. This turn. I will never turn down resist. I think resist can be a really big keyword that turns the tide in a battle.
Yeah.
It's also something that's really hard for your opponent to plan for, is resist. Like, we're so used to doing the math in our head of,
they're like, they're going to trade into my thing, and then they'll die, and so then I'll get that tempo, and then you're like, oh wait, I'm trading up into something, and it's not dying, in fact.
Right. Yeah. And so like they have to play this, because you can drop Prince Phillip, support somebody, and get this ability, and they didn't know that you were going to play Prince Phillip. So it's a little bit of a mind cannon. Like, can I outplay my opponent here? There's outplay potential. It's got decent stats. It's inkable. It's got the lore counts to it, and it's in a faction that already has a lot of support synergy with it. I do think Prince Phillip could be just another tool in your toolbox towards working towards a really good support deck.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a cool card. I think that until there becomes a card draw engine for supporting, I'm worried that a lot of these support cards, though good in a bubble, aren't really going to see the light of day, just because how are you fueling them, right? And what is the benefit to supporting if you don't challenge, or if there's nothing to challenge? But in that world in which and as somebody that has been playing Alice decks since it came out, This is a card that I've been looking at too and being like, well, what if I splash like one or two of these into the deck and start, whenever I support something to go trade, they don't actually die in return. That seems pretty nice. So, yeah, we will see how this one pans out. But I do agree. The stats and the effect are all in the right place. The question is, will it fit into an archetype? But there's no doubt that the card itself is it is designed with intention in a way that I think people are overlooking, to your point. Minnie Mouse, Musketeer Champion. Speaking of Alice, this card is getting 2 of these slotted directly into my Alice deck. This is basically a World's Greatest Criminal Mind on a body. The Quest for 2. It has Bodyguard. It's pretty decent. I think a lot of people are sleeping on this card for a couple reasons. 1, the fact that it's uninkable. 2, the fact that it's a Musketeer. And I think a lot of people are not very convinced that Musketeers as a tribal tag strategy can actually get the job done. I'm one of those Musketeer doubters. And unfortunately, because of the way they statted this, which is ever frustrating, they gave it 1 attack for a 5-drop, which means not only can it basically never challenge anything, as a bodyguard, it's not killing anything back. And of course, it comes down 1 turn before Madame Medusa and just instantly dies. That being said, the ability to actually get its effect off with consistency is what's going to flip this card from being a bad binder, card to being a game winner. And I, in some early testing of playing this in Alice, have already found it to have won me some games. I think that there is enough attack buffing effects in the game between support and between Ruby things like Maui's Fishhook and stuff like that. There's enough things that will allow you to buff your opponent's cards that this is a really intriguing and enticing niche but powerful card that I wish people would give a little bit more opportunity. I haven't seen anybody messing with it. I don't want to be the only one trying to find a home for this, because I think that anything that comes in and kills something should be being looked at seriously.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially, assuming that you're hitting like a decently valuable target, this is essentially Dragonfire with upside. Mm-hmm. And Dragonfire is on the fringe with Ruby Amethyst even now as kind of a splash card from the first chapter.
Yep.
And the only reason it's really not played consistently is because Ruby Amethyst has other really good removal tools. So to have a potent removal tool in a faction that doesn't typically have potent removal tools on a decent body,
right,
leads me to believe that this card is going to have a pretty decent showing.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to buff attack into this to then be able to take something out. Mm-hmm. It's I don't think that it's going to be hard to imagine the applications of Minnie Mouse Musketeer Champion from everything else other than challenging. I think you're right. I think challenging, this unit is underwhelming with its stats. I even wish that the defense stat was higher on an uninkable 5-drop.
Yeah.
I wish it was like a 1/7
a little bit. Yeah. It's understated, no doubt.
Like make it where 2 units have to kill this thing, and that's worth it.
Yeah.
But assuming not, unless they've, if you're taking something out that's got 5 attack, then you're assuming that maybe your opponent doesn't have 2 things out that have 5 attack, and this is going to live because of that through at least a turn. I don't know. But yeah, I do wish that it had at least a little bit of better stats. But it's a great target for Bibbidi Boppity Boo as well.
Well, potentially, yeah. As long as you have things to kill. I think this is also a card that maybe a meta forms around high attack cards, especially with things out there like Under the Sea and the Muses punishing all of these. There is truly so many meta cards with 2 attack or less. So many Ursulas and Merfolks, Ariels, right? Cinderellas. There's so many powerful cards that are in mainline decks with Hiram Flavershams, right? They're getting punished by these new Emerald effects. Maybe, and of course, Minnie actually weirdly gets punished by it, right? But maybe a meta forms in response to that with a bunch of big things like Maui's and Medusa, although she's at 4, but things with high stats that you're wanting to deal with. I mean, obviously, we're already seeing people playing with Lumiere to buff their board. Well, that actually plays right into Minnie's hand. So there's some cool stuff out there that this could be played as response. I also think that along with any of those sort of supporting archetypes, I would love to be seeing some decks with like 2 of these slotted in permanently, not as a counter, but because they have these combos that they can set up. So let's take a look at your pick, Gaston, Despicable Dealer.
Gaston, Despicable Dealer. I think that this card is going to be fantastic. We've heard some people talking about this card, in other videos, kind of talking about like they think this is going to be a good card. But I don't think that this card is being talked about enough.
Ooh,
I think this is a better card than people are giving it credit for, even for those that are giving it some attention. It's easy to rationalize the application of Gaston because we have a very similar card that already exists and has seen play, being Doc. Doc being a 3-drop in Amber with a similar stat line that discounts the next, when he quests, discounts the next card you play by 1. Mm-hmm. What does this do? Gaston, when you exert him sideways, you play 2, you pay 2 less for the next character you play this turn. Okay, so it's Doc, but better. You're just not questing for it, which makes the 1 lore count on Gaston negligible because you're using it for the ability anyway. He's a 2/4, so he's got a better defensive stat line, which you could... Doc was hard to remove at the 3-drop slot already, but wasn't impossible to do so because you had things like Smash. But a 4 defense is going to be even tougher to be able to remove.
And you also have aggressively statted characters like Mr. Smee with 3 attack, or you have Merlin Crab, right, with 3 attack. Now, granted, Mim Fox will still take care of it, but like that's one thing.
Captain Hook,
Captain Hook. There's a reason why, Lorcana tends to stat the attack on their characters a lot lower than other games with similar curve systems like Hearthstone, where the attack tends to scale. Lorcana, you don't typically get cards with more than like 4 attacks. So there's a lot of extremely meta relevant cards at multiple costs with only 3 attack. 4 is a big break point in this game.
Yeah. So, and outside of the stat line and all that, let's think about the application of the ability. So you have the ability to even go 1-drop Pluto. On turn 2.
The dream.
On turn 2, you use Pluto's ability of discounting something, and you ink to then be able to play Gaston on turn 2. And then on turn 3, you ink again, use Gaston's ability, and on turn 3, you are playing a 5-drop. Or you drop Gaston on curve on turn 3, and on turn 4, you're playing a 6-drop. 5 and 6, you and I both agree, Ian, is that breaking point where there's just a lot of very, very valuable cards that if you can cheat them out, the value that these 5-drops and 6-drops can give you across all of the factions can turn the tide in your favor and like put the pedal to the floor so that way you just stay ahead of your opponent. Especially if you're going first. Like that's almost it's almost a way to guarantee winning going first.
Absolutely. So, I think this card is pretty bonkers to your point. And there's a reason why I think Gibby picked it as a sleeper, which is that like the people that are hype about it are not hype enough. This card's nuts. It has so many applications.
Like you're going to slot this in any deck that ramps out of Amber. Like it's going to be so good.
Anything that's not an aggro deck in Amber, you're like excited about this card.
Even if you don't play Pluto, just play Lantern on 2. Yeah. Play Gaston on 3, and then the world's your oyster.
And then play a 7-drop on turn 4.
It's gonna be gross. It's gonna be absolutely gross.
It's gonna be sick. Yeah. I think that imagine somebody somebody plays you play Gaston on 3, they respond with a Minnie Mouse, thinking they're gonna get like 3 quests off, and you're like, Madame Medusa, suck it, Minnie Mouse, you're dead.
Bye-bye.
Before you even quested. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of ink combinations this could be good on. We could wax poetic about this all day. We won't. But Gaston, oh man, I'm really hoping I pull a bunch of these on day 1 because I want to slot it into like 3 different decks. I picked Thieves, the Big Olive. I wish I could turn it sideways. But, there it is. Okay, turned it sideways. Nice Thieves, the Big Olive, fantastic card art. I think is really funny. It's like in the middle of the Titans attacking. Honestly, I think this has a chance at being the best new location from the set. I think a lot of the new locations feel maybe a touch underwhelming. I think that there's going to be a few that pop up as like, oh, wait, we overlooked this. And this is like my stab at that. I think this card is being a touch overlooked. I think that it's easy to see this card bricking, right? Not necessarily bricking as in like, oh, like you're, I guess brick is not the right word, being dead in hand a lot, right? Oh, I'm behind on board. When am I ever going to have time to play this, move a character there, and then swing, right? Now, fortunately, unlike other cards like that, this one's inkable. And while it is a bit of a win more card, it's also a card that if you're either ramping or drawing a ton of cards, like with an Amethyst Steel, you can see the application of going like, I'm inking every turn until the end of the game. The game could drag on. Like Amethyst Steel decks typically do find the games to drag for a bit and turn into a grind fest. This is a card that will break you out of that grind fest in combination with things like Mim Fox, in combination with things like Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood. There's so many cards that would love to challenge into things and gain additional lore. I did test it a little bit with Ruby Steel. It unfortunately there's not enough card draw, and because you don't have ramp, the exact problem I just mentioned earlier was the case. And despite me taking it out of that deck and feeling like it was the correct choice, I did see the instances in which it gained the 2 lore and went, wow, if Ruby Steel had more card draw, this thing would have dominated. And so I think Thieves the Big Olive is just going to be an incredible tool for decks that, again, are focusing more on challenging. Steel has a bunch more options for that now, and I can see it being played in Sapphire Steel or Amethyst Steel specifically. Gibby, Thieves, what are your thoughts?
Amethyst Steel is my thought as well. I think things like Fox are going to be fantastic with Thieves. On turn 4, you being able to shift or bounce a unit back, play it with Fox, and then
move
Fox over to Thieves, and then
Pretty
get the
gross.
2. Yeah, like there's a lot of application there. To your point, I'm a little underwhelmed with some of the locations that have come out so far for the Ursula set, but we may overlook some. I think Thieves, the fact that it's only 1 to move a unit there is what doesn't make this card garbage for me.
Yes, for sure.
If the application of moving something there was any more costly, I would just absolutely write this card off. But I'm not willing to consider that it's going to be awful yet. But I'm just not impressed by this card as of now.
Sure, fair enough. We will see if this gets any application. Your selection for wait, did we get your Steel selection? I must have put it out of order. Either way, let's jump over to Amethyst. I think I got it out of order.
We'll probably wrap back around to my Steel.
I think we will. Right. I think we will.
So my Amethyst card is Bruno Madrigal, Undetected Uncle. 4-drop, 3/3 evasive, and I was very interested in these type of decks last set because we started to get a little bit of this looking at the top of your deck and getting some value out of that. And this card just takes it to a whole nother level. Mm-hmm. You can exert Bruno, who is evasive, name a card, and then reveal the top card of your deck. If that named card is what you said, put the card into your hand and gain 3 lore. Woo! Otherwise, put it on the top of your deck. So you are going to take a card, put it in your hand, draw it, and gain 3 lore on an evasive card. He might as well just have 3 lore printed on him as his effect. You're putting this card in your deck. You are stacking your deck to be able to do this consistently where you don't miss. You are going to be Steph Curry at the 3 line. You are hitting every single one of these shots, gaining every single one of those threes, and it's going to add up. Imagine if you have 2 Brunos. Somewhere, which, hey, you could stack the deck so you draw a second Bruno. Sure. I think that a card like Boss is on a roll. Yeah. As long as you have a decent memory, you will just create turn after turn after turn of value for Bruno. The application is there. It's got some other support cards within Amethyst that will also make this card good. I think this is going to be a build around card in the deck. What do you think?
I agree. I think that there's some neat stuff you can do with this. I think that the detractors of this card, of which I've heard several, are basically saying the amount of investment in deck space that you need to turn Bruno on with any level of consistency, aka not only do you need Bruno, you also need to not be, getting rushed down at this stage in the game in which you would develop him, and you need to be able to stack the deck with consistency, right? I hear and acknowledge all of those, but I think if any color can get away with a slow developed play like Bruno, I think it is Amethyst. And think about it this way, like you don't have to play him exactly on turn 4. If you're busy controlling the board with Mim Foxes and stuff like that, I think you're fine anyways, right? Like you can just sort of say, okay, wait till I've controlled the board or wait till my opponent has a slow developing turn, and then I'm going to slam Bruno. So, or in this case that, okay, I'm playing against a control deck, right? You can just jam Bruno every time you have him and see if they have the answer to it, right? I think that, there are a number of things you can pair it with. There's a number of ways you can stack the deck, from bosses on a roll to even if you can get away with playing it in Amber. Now, granted, your controlling tools is a little low here, but Alma Madrigal, the matriarch, the grandma, she's going to be able to not only go get Bruno and put it on top so you can develop it with consistency on turn 4, but also after you have a Bruno out, she'll be able to go and toolbox any Madrigal you want and let Bruno draw them into your hand, gain 3, and then you can develop it. So if you're like, oh, wow, I need a rush unit, let me go get Luisa. Oh, wow, I want to develop a quester, let me go get Isabella. And so you're going to be able to stack the deck with plenty of tools inside Amethyst, as well as a couple tools outside of it. Another thing I've thought about, and I'm sure you thought about this too, Gibby, is like, well, what if you played Boss on a Roll, stacked the top 5 cards, and then played this with like LeFou or Fan the Flames or Shield of Virtue and used it multiple times in a turn?
Just keep untapping it and doing it
calling
multiple times.
Yeah, like, Turbo Prophecy. There you go, right? Like, I think it could be really cool. Fully agree.
Just call it the 10 Commandments deck.
Oh, that'd be pretty good. Let's talk about my Amethyst selection, which is Elsa Storm Chaser. This is one that I've been surprised not as many people are putting in their top 10 lists. I suppose I understand why on the surface level you would be like, well, just play Mimfox. You're playing this, just play Mimfox on 3. I get it. It's really hard to justify cards in purple in like the 1 through 4 range when you have such a consistent, powerful package as the bounce package. But I'm here to tell you that if you're going to be playing a Amethyst deck that wants to go into the late game, especially one that's not playing with red, I think Elsa may be a card that you include along with the Mim package, or perhaps even separate from it. Why? Because it basically turns any of your characters into a rush unit the following turn. So let me paint you the picture of playing Elsa and then shifting it, or not shifting in, but playing and hard casting in a Robin Hood and giving it Challenger and Rush. That seems pretty good. Tinkerbell. What if you play a Tinkerbell and then you say, you know what would be better than Tinkerbell dealing 1 damage? Tinkerbell dealing 1 damage and swinging, just like the olden days when you used to shift Tinkerbell. So I think that there retains some ability for this to just sit on the board and wait for the perfect opportunity for you to apply that Challenger and Rush. And more than that, this is probably the best shift target for 8-drop Elsa that we have. The other 3-drop Elsa has 2 defense, guys. Like, it's not good. And while the effect of the other one being able to exert something is cute, there are other ways we can do that better with things like Pinocchio. So why play that one when you can play this one, which, while, okay, yeah, it's uninkable, I hear you, but at the same time, you can basically sit there with an ace up your sleeve and freeze the opponent, who's going to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, what do I do? If I play something high value or I quest with something high value, whatever they have in hand is going to turn into a rush. And if I don't deal with this, which otherwise is presenting no threat, they're going to shift Elsa in on turn 6 and tap down all my stuff and immediately start questing for 3. I think this is a super underrated card. I'm extremely high on it. It's also a hero, which could potentially operate along the lines with some of the new cards like Phil and your steel selection. So there's some really cool stuff here. Gibby, is there any reason not to love Elsa? Because, man, I am so high on this card.
I think I fully agree with all of your statements here on Elsa. I think being the prime early part of the shift combo for the big 8-drop Elsa, which remains a very, very potent, one of the best late game cards if you can justify playing it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic. All of the tags are really great. This is even a card that works with brooms because it's a sorcerer.
Yes,
Like
that's true.
it's like and wouldn't you just want to jam a broom into someone's face? Like drop a broom, get the effect, and then run it in. Like,
Yeah,
and we're seeing a
yeah.
lot more
I didn't
broom
think about that,
synergy,
but yeah.
especially with like resist units and all of that are within brooms. Like you've got this toolbox of the brooms that are so much better. This is a great addition to it. I think Elsa is going to have several different avenues to find a home with the Challenger and Rush. I think this card is going to be great.
Yeah, there's a lot of cards that like are slow to develop, right? That you're like, oh, I would love this card if I didn't have to wait a turn before using it.
Exactly.
And here it is, and it's if you know, and I think that if this card wasn't called Elsa, I would be like, yeah, it's all right. Yeah, maybe it needs a perfect situation, but like it's a shift target for Big Elsa, and I'm like with 4 defense, right? I think that this is just a home run, slam dunk, touchdown, field goal, whatever it is in hockey. And
Penalty box.
Yeah, well, maybe not that. Hopefully not that. I just really like this card. I think that like sleeper is maybe even too low for my declaration of this card's value, and I'm willing to be wrong, but I like shifting Elsas. What can I say? Here we go, Gibby. We went full circle. I was like pressing the next button. I'm like, trust that I didn't forget to pull it up.
You just wanted this order so that way, because this combo's off of the Elsa. You're just big brain.
I'm just big brain. Let's
just
go.
Big brain. All right, so my steel card is One Last Hope. This is a song that out of steel that costs 3. Chosen character gains resist +2 until the start of your next turn. That's an important differentiator.
Yes.
Not this turn, until the start of your next turn, so it plays all the way through your opponent's turn. If a hero character is chosen, and spoiler alert, there are over 200 heroes.
So many.
At this point in the
game.
So many. After this Ursula set drops. They may also challenge ready characters this turn. I want to make Namari work so bad at a steal, and it's just tough to play a 4-drop on 4 that does nothing for a turn
and has awful stats.
It has awful stats. And that's the thing. If Namari's stats were better, it would see an immense amount of play, like Cinderella Stoutheart does. Right. And Cinderella Stoutheart is just a little too expensive. That way it's a little bit inconsistent. One Last Hope allows you, at a very easy to accommodate sing price, to give resist to and challenge a very key unit on the board, getting past ward and every other keyword that exists with the outside of evasive, unless you have an evasive.
And bodyguard, I think, still blocks this.
Yes, but so assuming that, but even if it's a ready bodyguard that they didn't want a bodyguard with, you can take it out.
Right.
So you've got the ability to attack almost any unit in the game and probably live that target, especially with all the challenger synergies. I think One Last Hope is going to be, and you're also a little bit protected because you have that resist the next turn until it gets back around to you again to them play. I think One Last Hope is going to be a fantastic utility card that isn't doing damage from hand, but it's going to be doing damage from something you've established on the board. It's also really hard to forecast from your opponent's perspective of what you're going to be able to do, because we're conditioned at this point in Lorcana that my unit's ready, my unit is readied, my unit is safe, unless they have a spell that can hit. And that's not the case here anymore.
Yeah, so this card,
I love this card.
This card in my early testing, you can actually check out the video where my girlfriend and I played a little bit of a Ruby Steel Heroes against some Brooms. This was an MVP card from the Heroes side, and part of the reason is not just that it allows you to challenge ready characters. It's that you challenge, you don't take as much damage, and then you sit there for the next turn. Of course, the downside being, oh no, I'm exerted. They're just going to return trade into me, except now I have that resist 2. This card being used on a Champion of Sherwood Robin Hood on like turn 4, just even it being hard cast on turn 4 was disgusting. This is also a card that if you're playing against an early game deck that develops aggressively, if you play the 2-drop Mulan, Enemy of Entanglement, that gets +2 attack whenever you play an action, and then hard cast this on turn 3, you have a 3/3 2-drop with resist 2 that can challenge ready characters, and you can eliminate whatever setup card that they were building right away at the beginning of the game. Now, granted, that's a Ruby Steel combination. I think heroes are going to be better in a Sapphire Steel or a Amethyst Steel deck, that they will have enough resource extension to really play out a ton of heroes alongside Phil. But either way, One Last Hope is a nuts card, because at the same time that it is destroying your opponent's things that they just recently developed, it is also protecting your units that are still on the board, allowing you to snowball an advantage. Really, really cool card. Can't get enough of it. Awesome artwork. And yeah, what a great way to close out this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to drop a like, consider subscribing. We do content for Lorcana. There's going to be a ton of it out over the next couple of weeks as we get our hands on the new stuff. We've got a couple more videos coming out this week hyping up the new stuff before it drops, and then after drops, we will be making deck videos. I will be playing more tabletop. Gibby will be playing on Pixelborn, so we'll get plenty of opportunity to show off the new stuff. Be sure to check it out and don't miss it. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.